Being 7 o'clock, we'll open this meeting of the City of Kenmore Planning Commission. The first item on the agenda is election of officers. And I think in past years, and Lori can correct me if I'm wrong, we've started with chair and moved to vice chair, I believe. So I guess we'll open nominations for chair for 2020.
Nominate Mark Orishel for chair.
Okay, we have a nomination. I think it needs to be seconded.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any discussion?
You're doing a fine job.
I wasn't fishing for a compliment, but thank you, Carol.
It's genuine.
Okay, I
Yes,
appreciate that.
please.
Okay, well then, why don't we have a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all. Appreciate that. So our next is the vice chair. Do I hear a nomination for vice chair?
I nominate Suzanne Greathouse.
Do I hear a second for that nomination?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for Suzanne to be our vice chair. Any discussion on that motion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, passes. Suzanne is the vice chair, so thank you all, and welcome Suzanne to that position. Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. So do we have? Okay, no citizen comments. Next item is approval of minutes. Can we approve these minutes en masse, or do we need to approve them individually? Okay.
Having read through our minutes, may I make a motion? Having read through the minutes, I make a motion that we adopt the minutes as written.
Great. Do we hear a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Okay, it's been moved, seconded, and thirded to approve the minutes from September 3rd, October 1st, October 22nd, November 5th, November 19th, and December 3rd of 2019. Any discussion on that motion?
Can I just make one comment?
Yes?
It's unusual to get them all so late. So I know that there was transition, but I think it's wonderful that we have them now. And it would be nice in 2020 if we had them in a little more timely manner.
Okay.
Question. When I heard you list the dates, I wasn't sure I heard it correctly. Do you mind restating the dates?
Sure, I'm just reading from the agenda here. September 3rd, October 1st, October 22nd, November 5th, November 19th, and December 3rd. That
Mine didn't have 11/19. That's okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, in the packet? Does anybody, you want to take a minute or two and read through the 19th for those who haven't had a chance to?
Copy in front of me, so. Thank you.
All good? Okay, all in favor of the minutes as listed being approved, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the minutes for those dates are approved. Next item is the 2020 docket. So I'll invite up Senior Planner Lori Anderson to join us.
Good evening and welcome to 2020.
Likewise.
Right. So last week, the City Council approved the docket for the year. And so I thought we could take this time to talk about the projects that have been assigned to you. And then I thought I might also give you an update on where we are with some of the projects that you worked on last year, so you're aware of that as well. So the council assigned basically 4 projects to you for this year. The first one is the parks element of the comprehensive plan. Now you're going to say, well, didn't we just look at that? So the PROS plan, the Park, Recreation, and Open Space Plan, is actually different from the comprehensive plan. It's a kind of a strategic plan that's required by the state to permit the city to pursue grant funding for parks projects. The last time the PROS plan was updated, it actually was adopted wholesale into the comprehensive plan. But that's not ideal. It has kind of a different focus, and it isn't in the same format as the other chapters in the comprehensive plan. So we intend to bring forward the revised parks element of the plan. I don't imagine this will be difficult. There probably will be some tweaking, but the foundation will be the goals and policies in the PROS plan. And we thought we should do that while it was still fresh. So you can review it. The City Council can't adopt the comprehensive plan amendments until the end of the year. So you'll kind of review it. We haven't decided yet whether we would have you present that to the City Council or hold it until later in the year. My preference is probably to have you present it and then just have them be ready to adopt by the end of the year. So the next 2 projects, and I'm sort of talking about these in the order that we anticipate bringing them forward, are the result of the housing strategy plan that was adopted several years ago. There were a number of items. They were given priorities, and so these are 2 priority items from that strategy plan. And the first one is to look at creative and flexible ways to allow affordable housing projects on public lands or nonprofit lands to achieve their goal, perhaps without all the complexities of the permit process. This is not to say they wouldn't have to go through a review or anything like that, but we're looking at some creative ways to address that. And as part of that, there was an applicant. Every year we have an application period in November when people can come forward and ask for comprehensive plan or zoning code amendments. Those are called private requests, and we had one this year. We haven't had one for several years. And the proposal was to do a senior housing project with some affordable housing on a property in Kenmore. And staff had recommended again, they wanted to do just a straight rezone to a higher density. Staff recommended against that because we tend to think that the land use within the city should be considered all together. We'll be doing an update to the comprehensive plan in the next couple of years. So we recommended against pursuing a rezone on this one property, which would have been to a higher density than any other property in the city. Instead, we said it's likely, it's possible, that people could come forward and really propose a housing project, and whether it's an affordable housing project or a project for seniors, that would be of great benefit to the city, but cannot move ahead under the way the current zoning rules are written. There needs to be a creative opportunity for that kind of a project to receive consideration. So we are thinking that this likely will involve a chapter of the zoning code called the development agreement chapter. But we haven't even begun to research, and maybe there's some other creative approach that the commission could consider to address how this kind of a project that might not fit in a regular box could still be brought forward. So that's the first project. And the second project is the Missing Middle Housing Project. I don't know quite what the scope of that project is going to be. Missing middle housing, as you know, can be, it could be duplexes, it could be cottage housing. Some other more dense types of housing are considered missing middle. I don't know where the line will be. And it may be that this is a project, it probably won't start until, I would guess, until the summer, maybe. This may be a project where we'll want to have some conversation with the council early on in the project to kind of talk about the scope and what this project should entail. So the Missing Middle Housing project will be coming forward, and as part of that, we committed to the council that we would have one of the missing middle housing panelists. I think several of you were at that panel. Anyway, one of the folks there is a consultant, and we may ask him to do kind of an audit of our code to see, you know, once we know what we're focusing on, to see where the constraints are, if it's not obvious. Then the fourth project is incentives to office development. I'm not sure that we'll get to this by the end of the year. Honestly, it'll depend on how comprehensive the view of the Missing Middle Housing Project is. But the idea, this came from the economic development strategy, and they had, Nancy Owsley's team had been heading that up, the assistant city manager, and had a consultant on board who we had her do an audit of the zoning code, and actually she thought we had a great zoning code. But there may be a few discrete pieces that we could pick off and consider that might make sort of incentivize office development in the city. So that would be something that potentially could come up at the end of the year. So, and then I put capital facilities element on here because we always have to look at the capital facilities element if there are changes. Because of some things in the PROS plan, as it's moving forward, I think we will have capital facilities element changes, at least for the parks portion of that element. So, and we would tackle that in the fall. So do you have questions about the projects or perspectives?
I think you already brought it up, Lori, particularly on the middle housing piece. The scope, I think, is something we really need to understand.
Right, I agree.
So now how do we get into this without tipping ourselves into rezoning 3/4 of the city?
Right.
So it's a pretty big issue, so
Yeah.
be sure we understand what the council's intent is.
Right, right. I think my impression is that cottage housing is something that has come up several times. So I would not be surprised if that at least was a portion of the discussion. Whether the council wants to get into looking at other duplex, triplex housing types, I don't. I really don't know. So other.
Well, that would be helpful to know. I mean, if you're
Yeah,
talking
right.
about some kind of a clustered cottage development, given the available locations within the city where you can do that, that makes the scope of it much more manageable.
Yeah.
Versus saying we're going to open all of the single-family neighborhoods to duplex development.
Right. And I don't think that we would be asking the city council maybe that specific question, but just maybe get their guidance on what they have in mind when they're thinking about this. I think it would have to be a joint discussion to give us some boundaries.
think part of that too
Work
would be
within.
coming back to something we've talked about before on similar topics. What is our objective here?
Right. What are the objectives? Yeah.
For instance, how
Right.
much additional housing? I know we're going to get some new numbers in a year or so.
Right, exactly.
And
And-
where are we on our target? What is our new target likely to be so we don't overreach here on this?
Right. One interesting approach, depending on, in fact, John Owen was the panelist with the missing middle housing discussion that I had really hoped could talk about this. It didn't fit in well with the panel. But his firm had developed it was a pilot project. It was really unique in terms of thinking about housing types and ways to have a community consider them without leaping into it. So that they did a series of, I think they had 3 demonstration projects of different types. People had to apply, they had to say why they were going to do the best one there ever was, kind of a thing. And then the city vetted those, and they're being, I think, built now, just as a way for the community to understand what is this, what does it look like. Kirkland did something very similar with their cottage housing rules. They had a development project. And so I'm not saying necessarily that cottage housing is where we need to do a development project. There are lots of examples of that now. But if the council wished to look at other things, that might be a slow approach to the notion.
I was a little curious on the parks element. You mentioned that the pros plan would be or the goals and policy would be sort of the foundation. What else might we be looking at that might be different from the pros
Right.
plan?
Well, it certainly would be a condensation. I mean, the pros plan is 97 pages long, and there's no element in the comprehensive plan that's that long. So I think what we would be trying to do, we wouldn't be doing a demand and needs analysis, for example. We would provide background. The traditional way that these chapters are structured are that you have background information, sort of demographic information, other relevant information, and in fact may refer to the pros plan. And then really the focus is on the goals and objectives and policies in a broad sense. So again, there are goals and objectives in the pros plan, and I would anticipate we would be taking most of those straight out of the pros plan to put into the element, but restructuring and maybe some refinement.
Okay, so not a huge additional.
No, I don't think so.
Exploration,
And
okay,
I
yeah.
think that's why, as we were thinking of scheduling, we thought it made most sense to do this first, while everybody remembers what you just did, and then we'll just kind of package it in a different way.
Right.
And have it ready to insert. Right?
So I'm trying to understand it again. So you had mentioned that the format was different between the pros plan and the capital
And that comprehensive plan.
comprehensive plan.
Right.
And so this is just basically trying to reformat without losing the gist of the content in the pros plan?
It's focused on goals, objectives, and policies.
Right, so pulling those out.
Right, and then whether they are adequate to reflect what the vision is for the city's park system. They may be adequate. I haven't looked at it in this light. I wouldn't be surprised if there were certain things that needed to be amended or weren't appropriate in the comprehensive plan, something maybe that's too specific. I don't know yet. I haven't looked at it.
Well, I'm sure we'll all have lots of questions as we
Yeah.
get closer. It's a little hard to ask questions that based on just the
Right, just
the
an
first
outline.
the first open summary of these.
Right.
And just to clarify, I think it's pretty clear here, but the office development piece is strictly land use and potential
Correct.
zoning. We're not
Yeah.
talking about tax incentives or
No,
anything of that
no,
nature, which I know is the
this is only
council's
the land
purview.
use piece of it.
Yeah, okay. would that potentially encompass, rezonings or?
It could, I don't know that it would encompass rezonings. It might look at, I'm trying to think of some of the ideas that were thrown out, none of which were captured or are necessarily things that would be brought forward. But there were some thoughts, one of which was if you were in a mixed-use building, to require a certain floor height on the second story. That makes it usable for multifamily or for office. So you're kind of building in a potential office space. That was one idea. Other ideas were if you are doing a mixed-use building, for example, and you would do office on your second floor, then you get a height bonus. I mean, these are just ideas. Yeah.
And again, we'd work within existing commercial zoning districts.
Yeah, there was
is the-
no,
is the thought,
there was
right?
no indication that we would be looking at any kinds of area rezonings.
Right.
No. Mm-mm.
Okay.
That was my question. I read
Oh.
it as the scope was going to be limited to downtown.
Yeah, I think the areas that were discussed were downtown and then the regional business area.
That would be an interesting thing, that one of the interesting things to look at would be we zoned a lot of multi-use. The idea that you would have some sort of retail on the first floor and then retail and then housing residential above it. But I think what we're finding is the market has no use for
Right.
that retail space.
No.
Like drive through Lake City and some around other parts of the city, I
Yeah.
see a lot of for rent signs going down Aurora and whatnot.
Right.
So having that redeveloped or having that as an option to become rental property for office, that may be something that would be.
Yeah, and there's no commercial zone in the city that doesn't allow office. Office
That
is
does
allowed,
That does not allow.
right, office is allowed in every commercial zone in the city. So that, it's not that there's a prohibition, so you would suddenly have to lift a prohibition. It's that, is there anything you could do that would incentivize it or make it more desirable in the future?
I guess we'll get into like defining what's an office in terms of potential uses then.
No, not
Or is
really. Office is pretty clearly defined in the code
code, okay.
currently. Right, so I don't think we'd have to adjust that definition. One question that has come up in some of these conversations has to do with light manufacturing, which is allowed actually in every commercial zone except downtown. If many of you will recall that light manufacturing was kind of artisanal manufacturing, things like bakeries or breweries or that kind of thing. So I suppose that's not really office, but there's some overlap, that spaces that can use that light manufacturing space often have an office component. So, anyway, more to come on that.
Any other, questions or comments or preliminary thoughts? Commissioner Mulcair.
Yeah. It mentions here on the second page of the memorandum that the pros plan is under consideration and is expected for adoption vote on the 10th of February, Monday next.
Correct.
Is that still
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
good?
And that's a perfect segue if you want me to talk about kind of where we are with the projects that you worked on in 2019. Is this a good time to do that?
Yeah, I have one other while I have the microphone button on.
Yeah.
Are city council meeting transcribed, or do we just see summary?
There's summary minutes. Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Do you know when the transcription from last night's meeting would be available?
Well, there won't be a transcription, but the video, The first part of the video, 2 hours and 20 minutes, is already on YouTube. And the second piece of it, the recording equipment failed. And so, but there was a backup system in place. So we have that information, but it's in the process of being uploaded. So the first part of the meeting, all the way through the public comment and through about the first half of the city council discussion, is already on the YouTube video. The second piece of it is being uploaded, and I don't think that's completed yet. They're having some trouble getting it through the system.
The reason I ask is I thought there were a lot of interesting conversations at last night's meeting relevant to the direction of PROS that I don't think even came up in our PROS recommendation meeting, joint meeting.
Right.
So it seemed like net new information available last night. Not net new information, but net new perspectives from council.
Yeah,
May
well,
or may not affect those policies and guidelines that we hope to pull out for the comprehensive plan.
right. So between the time you delivered the PROS plan to the city council and the PROS plan ended up on the council agenda for adoption on Monday night, the city council had a meeting specifically on the PROS plan and directed a number of changes. So those changes included a number of changes, for example, related to St. Edward and the ball fields. It included a change to the expected cost in the midterm for athletic fields, et cetera. So I'm not sure that I'm capturing because I didn't listen to all the public comment last night, but what I can say is that the city council went through the PROS plan and tried to address issues that they had relative to a number of issues.
And do those
Not just-
changes go directly from the council to staff for
Right.
updates? They don't have to circle back through the planning commission?
No, they went directly to us, and we made those changes, and that's why it's on the agenda on Monday night.
Right. So what we see March 3rd then, as part of our process, may not completely reflect what we delivered 2 weeks ago as our recommendation.
You know, I don't think they made any changes to the goals and policies. It's possible that there were very few word changes, but that part of it, no. The capital facilities piece of it will look somewhat different, but the goals and policies, no, didn't really look any different.
Okay. That's why I was wondering about the transcript, because I think there was a lot of verbatim comments last night that might reflect on what our goals and policies are, and they may be captured in the changes. I'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, right.
Thanks.
Okay. So, so the PROS plan, February 10th, again, is presumably the date for adoption, so that we'll meet our RCO deadline of March 1st, so that's important. Accessory dwelling units, several of you were there to hear the discussion. There was a lot of discussion. And so we are bringing back a lot of information to the council, and that's tentatively scheduled for February 24th. And what the information that we're bringing back is a lot more detail about all the pros and cons that you all discussed on a number of issues. And so we're bringing that back. We're bringing back some information from the ADU owner survey related to the issues. And we're bringing back some of the footprint schematics that we did. So it's all going to look pretty familiar to you if, if you see it. But the council, I think, really wanted to delve more, even though they get planning commission packets, they weren't focused on ADUs at the time. I think they really want to delve into all of that material. So, and that'll be on the 24th, and hopefully we'll get some policy direction from them and then can move toward finishing that up. And then the last project I wanted to mention was you won't believe this because it seems so long ago. Do you remember last June, the council adopted the shoreline and critical area rules? So the critical area rules went right into effect. But you may remember that the shoreline rules don't go into effect until the Department of Ecology runs them through their process, including a public comment period and review by a number of people. So I think it was in December, they notified us of some changes that they wanted. And so we then internally worked on a number of changes to satisfy their requirements. My perspective on that was that there was not really anything fundamentally changing. There was a lot of reorganization and some other kinds of changes. So we sent that to them at the end of December. And we just last week got the letter, what's called a letter of conditional approval, which says if we make all the changes that we had sent to them as possible changes, that they would approve it. So that, I think also, we just got that letter, but we're trying to get that also on the February 24th agenda. And then once we notify Department of Ecology that we've accepted their changes, there'll be brand new ordinances. Once those are adopted, then the rules would go into effect 14 days after we get a letter from them. So it's a long process. I guess that's why we don't do it every year, but every 8 years, I think it is. Anyway, so that's the latest on those projects.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't able, I was curious, what were some of the nature of the details, more details that they wanted?
So
On the pros and cons.
on the
I'm sorry, I'm going back to ADUs.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right. So the things that the council pulled out for more information or more conversation were many aspects of the regulations. Owner occupancy, parking, the size of the minimum lot for a detached ADU, sizes of both attached and detached ADUs, the door regulations. I mean,
A lot of stuff that came up in our joint meeting.
right,
certainly,
exactly.
yes, yeah,
And I am not in any way saying that they are not accepting of the Planning Commission's recommendations. I think they just really needed to talk about it and weren't in a position to talk it through. They needed more background. So,
And we did talk quite a bit at that presentation,
Uh-huh.
much longer than we anticipated. but
right,
It's a complicated idea.
right, right.
So it doesn't surprise me, but it makes me chuckle a little.
I'm sorry I didn't make that meeting.
Hey, stuff
Thanks to
happens.
You guys who talked, I did listen to the video, and I think you did a fabulous job. My conclusion out of it, listening to it, was just that we spent so much time, we got into so much detail, and I think we understood this, that trying to articulate why we came to the conclusions we did in 15 minutes was mission impossible. So
Right.
I'm not surprised, and probably somebody needs to walk the council through
Right.
what those decision steps were before they're going to be able to appreciate the nuances around it.
Yeah, I actually wondered that too. I think we did the best we could, under the circumstances there, but yeah, there was a lot more that perhaps
Yeah.
didn't translate necessarily to there. So I am glad that they're looking at it more deeply.
Right,
so.
and so basically, it'll be like the materials that you all had in front of you in a condensed version we'll present to them, and then they'll be maybe ready to.
They'll be fully educated like we are.
That's right.
And regretting it. But I think there is something to learn here as we go into the future. As we're coming to our decisions and doing the analysis and review that we do, how do we capture that information in a way that we can communicate it more efficiently or effectively to the city council? Because if we're going to do a job for them, we've got to be able to have them understand what we're doing. 15-minute presentation is never going to be right. But I think maybe it might be worth, whether it's staff or we do it as a commission, how do we communicate better? Because that was my takeaway from that. I didn't hear, if people saying, oh, these ideas are worthless. I was more hearing, gee, I just don't quite understand how you got there. And a couple of places where I think it got rough was because they didn't have that background. You know, if you peeled it back 6 levels to where you got started, you'd understand why you do that.
Right.
I think they had the material to read, though, before we came to present to them. And all we were really doing was highlighting what we thought was important for them to look at. And so basically, they are looking at what we brought and going, this is important enough for us to take the time to have a conversation ourselves, so that when we get ready to create these amendments and vote on them and make them ordinances, we have a way to communicate with the public. That's
Right.
It's actually very responsible.
And if the city council, you know, is moving in a significantly different direction than the planning commission, then they also will have to hold another public hearing. So we'll be advising them of that.
I do think Mike has a point well taken, and maybe, yeah, as we get into, future presentations, maybe think more about, I don't know, salesmanship, or really, because I think we did a good job explaining what our various recommendations were, what the highlights were, and at some level why we did that. But maybe we do need to recast it more in terms of really maybe trying to be more persuasive, perhaps. So that's one takeaway I sort of took
Or
from
like you're
that.
recommending, just giving them a better sense of how we started at this point and looking at the materials that we looked at and conversed with the public about. We came to these conclusions. And, change is hard. This kind of a change, especially in the residential neighborhood, single-family dwelling areas. I don't think it's just, you push a button and say, we're going this direction. There's nuances to it, and our community gets to decide, but they represent our community. So I do think it's very good that they're taking the time to have the conversation about it.
Maybe what would be helpful here is, as we go through complex issues like this, I think we framed them well. Here's where the half a dozen key decisions. But behind each one of those key decisions was a lot of discussion. So maybe if we organize it that way, what are the 3 or 4 key sub-decisions that we went through? And here was an issue, and we went in this direction because. So they can begin to see that this wasn't something that was arbitrary or dogmatic here. That there was some hard thinking here, and there was compromises. So it's kind of was either this or that. If you're going to answer the major issue, you're going to have to make some decisions. And this is the logic that we followed to get to this decision we did. So the council could look at that and say, oh, okay, I get that. Now, do I agree or disagree with that?
Yeah,
Would I make a different decision?
And that's what they get to do, but I think it's great because the staff actually has this material. And like you said, you can consolidate it so that maybe they don't have to go through the measurements, and that's not going to look right. And, when you look back and think back to some of our conversations, and then some of the conversations in that exchange that we had, there was immediate, well, why? Because that's just going to be not good, so it's okay. But that's the nature of adaptive change, is you have to take the time to allow the heat to go up and then go down once people have more information. It just makes more work for you guys.
That's what we live
Job
for.
security.
Well, and hopefully it leads to a better, a more thorough, outcome. Like I say, there were some sort of immediate reactions, and maybe as they look at it more, they'll understand more about things like owner occupancy, for example, why we came to, that conclusion. And the parking, I think there was some, some people were uncertain why we, would require parking and for various reasons. So, hopefully we'll all end up in a better place, and certainly
Right.
the council will too.
I think it's always a fine line between presenting not enough background information and too much background information. But I do think with this one, in the staff materials, we probably could have done a better, like one thing that came up was, well, what are other jurisdictions doing? That was a question you guys asked many times. We had the material, it had gone to them, but again, in the context of a planning commission packet when they're receiving things all the time, and it was over the past 6 months or 8 months. So we'll need to think carefully about what the council may need on a difficult issue as background, so that when you all present your more high level, this is why we made the decisions we did, they have the critical pieces of background information.
I think about this, and it comes back to my mind, rethinking what is the work product of the commission. I think sometimes we get into the work product is regulation. It's not.
No, it's not.
It's a recommendation to the city council, who then makes those decisions. And if we don't produce a work product at the end, it shows the logic trail. It doesn't have to be detailed, but a logic trail that leads to this is why we got there. I don't think we've done our duty. I think that's what I'm struggling with, is how do we do a better job of that? In my job, if I'm out there hiring a consultant to do that, one of the first things I'm going to want out of is a scope of work, an approach to work, and a clear understanding of what the deliverables are going to be. And maybe we ought to be thinking in those terms. What is the deliverable? It's probably consistent about most of the things we do. What ought to be in that? There's probably examples out there in other jurisdictions, other cities who've approached this problem. How do you, if we had an outline we can start with so that the staff can have it and then we fill it in as we go along, that would be nice. And I guess that's what I'm looking for, some sort of a guideline. We would go through and say, okay, we reached this decision. Can we fill this out?
I've been working with Maura on our filing system, and she is a master of telling me how we don't have to always provide paper, we can provide links. And it may be that as we, going forward, we're thinking of these presentations to the city council, it's almost like, if you want more information on this topic, here's a link, and you can hear, you could listen to the audio, you could look at the minutes, you could look at the materials that were prepared and presented, so that we're not overwhelming, but if someone wants to delve more deeply into a topic, that might be helpful. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah, one of the things I kind of thought, and sort of bears on this, is maybe anticipate what some of the objections might be. Like owner occupancy, for example, was some of the council members thought, sort of discriminatory towards tenants. And parking, some people thought that, if we're trying to reduce our climate, greenhouse gas emissions, why would we require parking? So I think it might help, as we're going through, especially these sort of complicated ones, if we can maybe anticipate what some of these objections come up in our own discussions, but if we can anticipate those, and as we go through that process, use that to help frame our own arguments and presentations. So. Learning opportunity.
And I think that topic actually is unique because we were trying to make an opportunity available, but not necessarily do it in a way where the outcome of creating that opportunity had unintended consequences. And none of us really dwelt on that much in the presentation, but thinking back to our discussions, that was definitely something that was kind of an underlying thread in all of our conversations was, if you open up these neighborhoods for people to make these changes, what are the unintended consequences? And we had examples of stuff that was already going on, and we just didn't want to fuel that. But I don't think we presented that motive to the council. They heard something else.
Well, I want to encourage you that you did exactly what you were supposed to do. You went through a very thoughtful and deliberative process. You looked at a range of options. You identified what your foundational principles were. Remember that list? We
Yes.
provided that.
Yeah.
And you came to, for the most part, a consensus recommendation, which you then presented. So I hope you are not feeling that you did something wrong or inadequate. You did exactly what you were supposed to do, and now the council takes on their role, which is, okay, this is what these great minds think, and we're going to consider this, and we're going to have some more conversation, and it may be a different outcome, but it's not because you did something inadequate, you know?
I don't think I don't feel that way.
I hope not.
I
I'm a
really
little
view
nervous.
it, I really view it as a process. It'd
it
be
is a
great if we
process.
had an end product that they could just put their stamp on, but, that's not really how it works in the world.
That shouldn't be how it works, right?
Well, and sometimes it does work that way. Think of all the hard work you did on critical areas. I don't know that the council had a single
Oh, that's true.
change.
Yeah.
That was a huge project. So it just depends on the topic and,
And some are inherently more, controversial, like mobile homes and ADUs. I mean, those are examples of things that are by definition, very political and should go to the council level for their deliberations, so,
Yeah,
yeah,
Okay.
certainly.
so they get to chew on that for a while.
right? February 24th.
They have a good,
The chewing.
a good variety of things to chew on, so.
Well, thanks for the update, Lori. Any other questions for Lori or about our exciting year ahead or any other topics for tonight? Okay, we are
So-
adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me?
No,
I
that's
retract
fine.
that statement. Go ahead, Lori.
The only formal active business besides election of officers, congratulations, is to cancel the February, I think it's February 18th. You know I'm terrible at the dates, so I will look at it. February 18th meeting. And then your first meeting in March would be the introduction to this parks element update. So if you could
Do I
formally
hear a
cancel that.
motion to cancel the February 18th meeting?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to cancel February 18th. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? It passes. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, could I add one thing?
Oh.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I just have to let you know that I'm not going to be at the first meeting in March. So I apologize for not being here, but I'll get all the information and be ready to roll the next meeting.
Great. Thanks, Carol.